Light on, please. Okay, welcome everyone. So we're here again with Ajahn Punnadhammo offering another teaching on dependent origination. So this is the third talk in this series that he's kindly offered to share with us. So since we're getting started a little bit late, we had some technical problems at the last minute, but we got them worked out. So I'll go ahead and pass things over to Ajahn Punnadhammo to give this evening's Dhamma talk. Thank you.
Very good. Before I dive into it, I was hoping to sort this out before we got on, but we had problems. Is it possible with this setup to share a screen to show an image?
You should be able to share a screen from your side.
That button says share. That would do it, eh?
That should do it.
Okay, let me try that. Is that showing up a diagram of the dependent origination?
No, I'm not seeing anything. Nope.
Okay, so it's not working somehow. Okay.
We can next time. We can get it worked out for next time.
Okay, I was hoping to do it this time, but never mind.
If you have Google Chrome, the easiest way is usually through a Google Chrome tab.
Oh, okay. No, I'm on Firefox.
Okay, we'll sort it out next time.
Okay.
Or if you want to email it to me right now, I can try to do it in the background while you start the talk.
All right, I'll do that. Okay. Okay, I just sent it.
Okay, so if you'd like to go ahead and start, and I'll try to get it set up in the background.
All right, very good. Okay, again, apologies for the slow start. Kind of technically messed up at this end. Okay, so today I want to look at the dependent origination as it applies to immediate practice, and which will focus on the middle section of the dependent origination. The last time we did the dependent origination as it applies to rebirth, and I focused on the first few nidanas from ignorance through to name and form. Now, the whole dependent origination is often illustrated in a circle as a wheel. This is not really supported directly from the suttas, but it is mentioned in the Visuddhimagga that the whole process can be pictured as a continuing circle, and it would certainly fit into the idea that this is an illustration of samsara, because samsara is from the verb samsarati, which means to wander, with the implication wandering aimlessly in a circle. And when we have the wheel illustrated, the 12 cycles, the 12 nidanas starting with ignorance, it can be divided into sections in different ways that overlap. There is a section that applies to the past, which is ignorance and karmic formations. Oh, here we are. Here's the diagram. So the past is ignorance and volitional formations. The present is the broad sweep from consciousness through becoming. And then we have the future, birth and old age and death. And it's also divided into cause and result. Ignorance and volitional formations are past causes. And then the section relating to the present, which means the present life, divides between results and cause. And then the future is seen as a result. Cause and result are categories that apply to the conditionality. What we have with the dependent origination in general, in theory, as I think I mentioned in the first talk, is the idea that everything arises due to cause and conditions. So there is a cause and then there's a result. In the terms of karma, that's karma and vipaka, but it's actually broader concept than that. Everything arises from causes. Nothing arises without a cause or from a single cause. So understanding the difference between results and causes is very important here for our practice. Results, when they're experienced, those factors that are classed as results, they have we have no direct control over them. They were set by causes in the past, and we are just experiencing the results now without having any control or input. They're classed as resultant in Abhidhamma, and causes are factors that we do have some control because there's a volitional factor involved. So you can think of it as a good analogy is playing cards. You're dealt a set of cards, and then how you play them is a matter of your skill. The metaphor is not perfect because in terms of dependent origination and karma, how well you play your hand, let's say, will determine the next hand that you're dealt. So if you play poorly, you'll get a poor hand, and if you play well, you'll get a good hand. You know, it's not randomized as in an actual card game. So what we have in detail here, once a being is born, you know, as we discussed the process last time, mind and body have arisen. Oh, and I see there's a mistake in this diagram. Two of the factors are reversed. It should be 6 senses, then feeling. Or 6 senses, contact, then feeling. Feeling is way out of place here. I should have checked this this diagram I pulled up more thoroughly. It's a bit messed up here, but okay. After we're born, we have a mind and body, so the organism is complete, and it's equipped with 6 senses. That's the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and body, and the mind sense. So these are like windows to the outer world. This is how we experience inputs from the universe through the senses. And the whole process of contacting the outside world is a complex one. The senses, vijnana operates through the senses, and then perception, which is not part of the standard list here, it's assumed, but perception parses the incoming data and creates a simulation that we actually experience. And this is all assumed here under contact, which should be following after six senses. Six senses, contact. Contact is, phassa in Pali, is defined as the coming together of the organ of sense, such as the eye, the consciousness as eye consciousness, and the object, such as a visible form. This is contact, and it's an active experience. Now, this is still considered resultant at this point, which means that what we experience, what we contact through the senses, is determined by past causes, one of which is always past karma. And we find this in detail in the Abhidhamma, that sense consciousness is always classed as a resultant, meaning that it's in part determined by our karma. I say in part because there are external causes for every experience. Now, if we see, for example, we see a beautiful sunset, there's the karma that we have acquired from the past that merits us having a pleasant visual contact. But that karma is only a potential until the external factors come together to make it possible. In this case, the rotation of the earth and atmospheric conditions. When these come together and we have the karma associated, then we will experience a beautiful sight. Then the next factor, and here's where, this diagram is somehow confused. I pulled this diagram up without checking it properly. The next after contact should be feeling, which is Vedana. Vedana is a mental state that is the rudimentary or basic level of emotional response. And it's much more simple and rudimentary than is implied by the English word feeling. We tend to use feeling to mean emotional states in general, but Vedana is much more immediate. It's I've seen it called hedonic response, which is a bit technical, but it's precise. It's the immediate result of every sense contact that it will be determined as pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. This is a very rudimentary level of mental processing. And from a biological point of view, you can see that for a living organism, it's pretty essential that they have some way of determining the external factors, categorizing external factors in this way. I would think even a one-celled animal would have some degree of Vedana. Finding something to eat is pleasant. Avoiding sensing a predator would be unpleasant. So we have a way of categorizing external inputs. And a great many of our ordinary experiences of Vedana are in the neutral category, which is not a no feeling, but it's a neutral feeling. So it's still a categorization. So things are either pleasant or unpleasant or neutral. And of course, it's on a spectrum. Things can be slightly pleasant, or they can be ecstatically, wonderfully blissful, or things can be slightly irritating, or they can be extremely painful. And feeling is also, Vedana is also categorized as mental and physical, although they're all ultimately mental, they're experienced in the mind. The physical ones are Vedana that is experienced immediately through the body, pleasure and pain in the body, like a sore foot, or a nice cool breeze on a hot day is pleasant. Sore foot is unpleasant. And it's a point that found in Abhidhamma is that it's only the body sense, the tactile sense, that is immediate enough to generate Vedana without any further mental processing. Inputs through the other sense organs are not immediately pleasant or unpleasant until the mind sense experiences them, and then they're categorized. So I think that this could be understood that if you step on a sharp stone with your bare foot, that's immediately obviously unpleasant. But if you see an object, it might be pleasant or unpleasant, depending on the circumstances and depending on your predispositions. See, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and this is quite true. And we have, like, with the sense of taste, there are certain tastes that some people find them delicious and other people don't like them. And we have the phenomenon of an acquired taste. You can learn to like something you didn't like before, and our tastes change over time. And this is the reaction of the mind sense to Vedana. But the really important point here is that Vedana itself is a resultant, meaning that after contact is made, there will be a feeling, and we don't have control over our feelings. They just arise as a result of complex conditions, including our past karma, our inclinations, our training, and the particular intensity of the contact, and so on. We can't control the feeling, it's just there. So ethically, it's neutral because it's a resultant. So there's nothing ethically good or bad about feeling pleasure or feeling pain. It's just a resultant factor. Now this is where the point of practice comes in, that's very important, is that this next transition from feeling to craving is the change from resultant to causative. And craving, or tanha, is a factor in which we do have a volitional input, although it requires some effort. If we just go with the flow and just follow around the wheel without making an effort, we'll fall into tanha. And also into tanha's opposite or complementary opposite of aversion. So a painful feeling will yield aversion, or the form of desire of wanting it to stop. A pleasant sensation will yield craving for more, or for it to continue. A neutral feeling leads to ignorance or dullness. And this is the point at which the cycle of the dependent origination can be broken. that we can avoid falling into the loop here at this point. And some teachers have made a great deal of about this as a major point of practice. I'm thinking particularly of Ajahn Punnadhammo. His books about dependent origination, he emphasizes this point. But here is the point of the change, the switch from the resultant. These are the cards we've dealt, and then the causative factors. These are how we play the cards. Craving, or tanha, which the same word is used in the formula for the Four Noble Truths. Tanha is classified as threefold. There is the craving for sense pleasure, which would also include the craving to avoid pain. Then there are the vibhava tanha and bhava tanha, the desire to be and not to be. Now, for beings of our sort, human beings, and also for a wide range of other beings from the hell realms, the ghost realms, the animals, and the devas, we are all categorized as being in the kama bhumi, meaning the sense experience plane or level. And for us, our psyche in the ordinary, unenlightened human ordinary state, our psyche by default revolves around the senses, and particularly the five physical senses. So our desire for sense experience and sense pleasure dominates our consciousness. Much of our thinking, much of our hopes and dreams and planning all revolve around sense experience. So this type of tanha is the noisiest or the predominant one at our level, but actually it's superficial relative to the other two. It's kind of the froth on the top, but underlying sense desire are the desire to be and to not be. And these are more fundamental, they're deeper, so that even when a being attains to a level beyond sense desire, such as a Brahma being, there still remains underlying a tendency to want to be or not to be. This would also apply to a human being who attains to the level of an anagami, a third level of awakening. They are beyond sense desire, but they would still have the desire to be. And it's this desire to be that is the karmic force that still binds them to rebirth. But without sense desire, they can't be reborn in the kama bhumi anymore, so they're reborn in the sukhavati, the pure lands. Desire to be, at its most fundamental, is just the desire to exist. But it expresses itself, it plays itself out in the life as a desire to be something more than you are, to be greater, to be stronger, to be more famous, more successful, whatever. Desire not to be, at the most primordial level, is the desire to not exist. So the desire for annihilation. And although that seems extreme, we all experience milder forms of it commonly. A desire to lower the level of consciousness, because consciousness can be felt as a burden. And beings do this, human beings do this all the time. An obvious example is intoxicants, drink or drugs, but other forms are oversleeping, or just vegetating in front of the TV. These are all forms of vibhava tanha. I don't want to be so conscious. I don't want to be so awake. I want to dull myself down. That's vibhava tanha. So, again, returning to this transition between between feeling vedana and craving tanha. If the feeling of is sukha vedana, pleasant feeling, that tends to lead to desire. If the feeling is unpleasant, then it tends to lead to aversion. And if it's neutral, it tends to lead to ignorance or dullness. And this is particularly happens when the person is not mindful, not fully awake and aware of the feeling. This is the importance of vedanusati. If you're aware of the feeling just as a feeling, then you can not fall into the next stage. You can't fall into craving or its cognate states. But if you're just mindlessly following the flow of the dependent origination, then you'll slide into craving. And after craving, it becomes increasingly difficult to break the cycle. It gains momentum like a snowball falling downhill. So this is the key point where we can make a change. And we can notice how feeling leads to craving. And one thing to contemplate about this is that sense craving is really, in the last analysis, is always about feeling. We can make a long list of things or experiences that we crave, but if we examine any one of them and ask, why do I crave this? And follow it back to the root, it's always because we either think or we remember from having experienced it in the past that this will yield happy feeling, sukha vedana. So it's really sukha vedana that we're craving. So the next transition is from craving to clinging. Clinging is the standard translation for upadana. A more literal translation would be as fuel, the fuel for becoming. And upadana is a more complex state than tanha. Craving or tanha is a fairly rudimentary state of mind. It's just wanting this or not wanting that. And it's really just an impulse in the mind in one direction or the other. But with upadana, the craving starts to turn into a project. It's no longer just wanting this or that. It's now maneuvering to get it and to hold it. And this upadana as a project to acquire an object has another effect in that it begins the process of creating a self. A self as a structure, self has no inherent reality, but as a mental construct, it's beginning to be built and assembled here. Because if you're going to possess the desired object, then you've created a duality of possessor and possessed, self and other. There has to be this polarity created, And this is more complex than craving, which by itself doesn't really require a self. But upadana, now you're beginning to get into a more deeper level of mental activity, and you begin to become trapped. There's an illustration, a metaphor for this that Ajahn Chah would use, talking about how the Thai people would catch monkeys. They would catch monkeys to train them for bringing fruit like bananas down from the trees. So they would catch a young monkey and train it. And how they would catch the monkey is they would get a coconut and drill two holes in it, one smaller and one larger, and drain the liquid out. Then they would put a rope through the coconut with a knot, so the rope was fixed through the small hole, and the larger hole would be just big enough for the monkey to get his paw through. And they'd put something like a hunk of mango inside the coconut, and the monkey would smell it, and he'd reach in and grab it, and he'd try to get his paw out, but now instead of a soft paw, he had a fist around a hunk of fruit, and he couldn't get it out, and he would not let go of the piece of fruit. So he'd struggle and scream and cry and keep pulling and try and get out until people came along and caught him. And this is clinging. We're clinging onto something, then we're trapped. We're trapped in samsara. And as I said, this begins the process of creating a self, which is matured in becoming. This is bhava. This is when we come into being as a self-identified entity. And again, there's no ontological or metaphysical reality to the self. It's entirely a creation of the mind, but it's here it begins. And the becoming can be in any of the orders of being, depending on past karma. And then it's experienced in the future as birth, sickness, old age, and death. And after death, there's again a rebirth, and there's a passage into the new existence in which memories are lost, and this is ignorance. So the cycle continues. And by itself, it's endless. There's no break to it. We have to make the effort to break out of this cycle. So what we have in sum are the 12 nidanas divided into past, present, and future lives, and divided into cause and result. Now this process we can also see is operating in time scale of the immediate present, that the whole cycle is repeated moment by moment. We come into birth not just in a new existence, but we come to birth momentarily. Every time that we succumb to craving and clinging, we create a momentary self, and we're born into that situation. And everything is impermanent, so this constellation of factors that we create out of our craving and clinging, we could say then we're born into that, and then immediately it ceases, and that's the old age and death. And the process at the level of mind moments, another way of even kind of finer grain of looking at it is the process of samsara at the level of mind moments is the mind consciousness craving an object. And this is the fundamental level of samsaric reality. is mind craving an object, taking an object, and then being dissatisfied with it. That's dukkha. Then the object passes away. That's anicca. And the mind immediately craves after the next object. And there's a kind of underlying dynamic here that the mind seeking an object is seeking to satisfy or complete itself in each moment, and it's an impossible project. No object, because of the law of dukkha, no object can ever satisfy the mind. The mind will always be left wanting and craving for the next object. So we see the cycle of the dependent origination occurring at this very fine grain at the level of mind moments. The mind desires an object and contacts the object dissatisfies the mind. So this is like a little death, and then the mind immediately seeks the next object. So in this way, we could say that samsara it's not a place or a condition so much as a process. It's something that we do. It's an action we undertake. We do samsara. Like a lot of Pali nouns, particularly abstract nouns, it's derived from a verb. The original form is sangsareti, to wander aimlessly or in circles. And this is the nature of samsara. This is the important thing to grasp about samsara, is that it goes nowhere. It's futile. And it's repetitive. We're constantly caught in these loops. And this operates on every time scale, from the momentary to the course of an hour or a day to multiple lifetimes. It's something we've been doing for countless lifetimes in the past, and unless we make a break, we'll do it for countless lifetimes in the future. And the real goal should not be to just improve conditions in samsara, but to make an end, to break out of samsara. And I hope to talk about that next time with the Upanisa Sutta and the transcendental dependent arising. So I'll stop there and take questions. And Bhante, I think we can probably dispense with the image now.
Okay. Oh, thank you, Ajahn, for that lovely explanation. And we have a few questions. So Vic asks, is contact in a regular person and an arhat the same? I.e., is the break in the dependent origination cycle only after feeling, even after enlightenment? I seem to recall the suttas mention that contact in an arhat does not happen. So is it that contact in the psychological sense requires ignorance, which is obliterated in an arhat?
No, I don't think that's correct. I don't know of a sutta reference that would say contact doesn't occur. Contact is simply the contact of sense consciousness, object, and sense organ, and all of those are present for an arhat. I don't see why contact doesn't occur.
Okay, thank you. And next, Hayden asks, some teachers emphasize the solution to dependent origination as stopping craving when it arises. Others seem to suggest the solution is to remove ignorance and stop the process there. Are both right?
Yeah, essentially, yeah, they are both right. These are the 2 points, ignorance and craving. These are the 2 points that are generally considered to be the motive powers, the origins of samsara. And you can look at it in in different ways from different angles. But I think the point with the transition between feeling and craving is one that is a practical approach that we can do in the here and now. Ending ignorance is a big project, but not succumbing to craving is something we can do a little bit at a time, immediately. So when we see a feeling arise, then we don't follow it. If we're fully mindful of the feeling, we don't need to follow it into craving. Of course, we should also be trying to diminish ignorance. We should be trying to expand the range of awareness and mindfulness and wisdom. But the teachers who, like Buddhadasa, who emphasize this feeling to craving link, I think are taking a practical, immediate approach, something that the practitioner can do on a small scale, little by little, here and now.
Okay, thank you. And Sud asks, can you explain how papancha and loving kindness fit into the cycle of dependent origination?
Okay. Well, papancha is the spinning out of the mind, the creating of structures, mental formations that that can get quite elaborate and out of control. And that's in terms of the dependent origination, papancha will arise out of desire. So it's a form of it would be in the stages of upadana and bhava, that the mind is running off into becoming in some imaginary structure. There's an old joke about the neurotic creates castles in the air, the psychotic lives in them, and the psychiatrist collects the rent. We create these castles in the air with our mind. We're constantly spinning out, and that's a form of becoming, even though it's just on an illusory or imaginary level. So this is papancha. Metta, or loving kindness, is also a mental formation and a feeling, but it's a wholesome and positive one. But it's not by itself, it's not one that leads out of samsara. By itself, it would, without wisdom, the Brahma Viharas, Metta, Karuna, Mudita, they would lead to a more fortunate rebirth within samsara. So we're still in the realm of upadana and bhava, but it's a more positive development. It's better than cycling downward. We're cycling into a higher level of consciousness with metta, but we're not escaping the dependent origination. Metta by itself is not able to do that.
Okay, thank you, Ajahn. And next, Vic asks, so is the break in dependent origination, i.e. in not craving, purely an act of cognition and will?
Well, it's definitely an act of will. I don't know if cognition would play a role, but the more important is sati, is mindfulness of clearly seeing the Vedana just as Vedana. So you have a pleasant feeling, it's a pleasant feeling, but you don't allow it to then cycle onwards into craving. And that will require some degree of volition. But I think the primary factor that's required is sati, or mindfulness, awareness, to be fully conscious at that moment.
Okay, and next we have a question from Sake. which I don't quite understand. It says, in Brahmaviharas, it says one will experience all pain, which is done by bodily action, misconduct here in this life. Is it true?
I don't understand that question either. Brahma Viharas usually refer to the states of metta and so on, unless he's referring to the Brahma realm, in which case there is no physical pain. So I don't know this. I think his somehow he's gotten something mixed up here in this question.
And that's the last question that I see here so far. So if there's any other questions, please type them in at this time. Otherwise, we can go ahead and conclude our session for the evening. So I'm not seeing any other questions appearing. So I think we can go ahead and conclude for the evening. So thank you again, Ajahn, for sharing the Dhamma with us and helping us to better understand this. Oh, we have, Sud says they have one last question. So we'll give Sud the opportunity.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think they're typing in the question. Oh, it says, never mind. Okay. So once again, thank you, Ajahn Punnadhammo, for sharing the Dhamma with us and helping us to better understand this deep and complex topic. So for those who are interested, okay, here's who typed in their question. They asked, what is liberation with loving kindness? They might mean liberation by loving kindness, metta ceto vimutti.
Yeah. Well, that would not be metta by itself cannot lead to nibbana, but it can lead to a liberation, a partial liberation, meaning that one transcends the sensual desire plane. Metta leads to, perfection of metta leads to rebirth in the Brahma levels, which is a partial liberation because you've left this big chunk of samsara behind, the sense desire level. But it doesn't, metta doesn't penetrate into the nature of reality with the depth that's required, that's found in the arousal of wisdom through vipassana and penetration of the nature of dhammas, that actually allows us to escape from samsara altogether.
And Sake gave some clarification, saying, whatever evil action has been done by this body born of action, that will all be experienced here in this life. It will not come to be hereafter in Brahmavihara Sutta.
Well, it could be what evil action you've done in this life could be experienced in a future life. It doesn't have to be experienced in this life.
And Vic has another question. Contact requires sense bases and consciousness. And is that the same as sense consciousness?
Yes. Yeah, contact is defined as the bodily organ of sense, the eye, ear, etc. The sense consciousness, the Chakra Vinyana, Sota Vinyana, so on, and the object, the visible form or the sound. So there's the three factors coming together, and the consciousness is meant here is Vinyana, sense consciousness.
Okay, and that appears to be the final question. So I think at this time we will go ahead and conclude the session. So if you're interested in more Dhamma talks by Ajahn Punnadhammo, he'll be giving another talk on this subject at the same time next week. So please continue joining in for our ongoing series on dependent origination. And please also join our other live streams that happen at the usual times. And if you're in the area, we will be having our annual Katina ceremony on October 31st. here at Empty Cloud Monastery, so you can come and join for an outdoor holiday celebration. Otherwise, please keep an eye on our schedule and join in for as much as you can. So we'll end with a traditional chant of appreciation. Annamayang Dhammakataya Sadhukarang Naramase Sadhu 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 Anumodami. And we'll see you next time.
Okay, very good.